What's up, everybody? Welcome inside Studio S. I'm Dan Koob, executive producer of content and media here at Sport Trade. Bit of a different show today. We were able to get Liz Young earlier this morning for an extended period of time, about 35 minutes. It's an awesome, awesome interview. If you don't know Liz, you're going to love our conversation. We talked about the approach of diversifying your futures portfolio on Sport Trade in the NFL Super Bowls market, but obviously relatable to any futures market, anywhere that you're trading or betting. We related the big Fed announcement today to sports and what that all really means for those of us who watch way too much sports and maybe not paying close enough attention to what actually goes on in the real world. And then we finished up with a really fun matching probabilities charts game to current stocks that may be in your portfolio as well. I think you're really going to enjoy it. But first and foremost, got to talk about the sweeps here on the program. We're giving away $100 every Friday on Market Movers. And in order to enter yourself into that possibility to get $100, it's super easy. Follow Sport Trade app on Twitter and then quote tweet the Market Mover show that you're watching literally right now with hashtag TradeUpNewJersey. She is the head of investment strategy at SoFi. You can see her on CNBC, hear her on her own podcast, The Important Part, and read her at SoFi.com. And most importantly, Liz Young is here, and she is a great friend of the program. What's going on, Liz?
What's up, Dan? I'm excited to be here. I'm not excited to talk about Philly, but I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for your continued enthusiasm. That was only the fifth time I had to do the intro. This is why we tape, but we're not afraid to pull back the curtain here on Market Movers. A lot of great talk about Philly coming up. Definitely want to talk about Wisconsin sports, sort of take the temperature of what's going on with your Packers. We were texting a little while back about the Brewers who are actually chasing the Phillies for the final wild card spot like a month ago. And I did something I wouldn't normally do here, Liz. I found the text and I pulled it up, and I want to pull this up for both of us to react to in real time. Because the Phillies are 2 wins away from the World Series. This is an actual text message that I sent you on September 30th when you said the Brewers are going to catch the Phillies. I said, it'll definitely happen. The Phillies suck.
That's so true. You know, it's funny. I looked at that again when the Brewers lost, and I was like, he was wrong. Good thing I didn't bet whatever Dan bets, right? I would have lost.
Good
but
thing.
Look, okay, for anybody who doesn't know me, I grew up in Wisconsin. I spent 32 years of my life in Wisconsin. Big Wisconsin sports fan, Brewer fan, Packer fan, all the things, right? The Brewers have not been to the World Series since the year I was born, and I just turned 40.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It's our turn, and we got sort of close, you know, the wild card thing. Okay, maybe it wasn't that close. It's not like we had it on lock, but still. I would have taken just even a playoff berth, you know, and we can't even do that. And, you know, the Packers are obviously not going to lift my spirits for the rest of the year. So it's over, I think, until 2023.
The long Wisconsin winter has started, and you don't defrost until like late April. So a very tough one. But you've got Spotted Cow. That's all that really matters. For those who know, you know what's up. Spotted Cow, maybe my favorite beer of all time.
Yep. And even in New York City. So I live in New York City.
Right.
I actually have a lovely friend who, for my 40th birthday, brought a 12-pack of Spotted Cow on the airplane. You can buy it at the airport in Milwaukee. They don't ship it anywhere. You can't get it outside of Wisconsin. So they brought it on the airplane. Yeah, they used it as their carry-on and brought it to me in New York City. So I still have 6 cans in my fridge.
That's unbelievable. I'm so jealous. I need to get on the same page as this friend of yours. Again, you mentioned you're living in New York, right? And we have a lot of people who work at Sport Trade who are Jets, Giants, Mets, Yankees fans, native New Yorkers who think this is probably the World Series from hell. Not only did they get swept by the Houston Astros, but now they have to watch Philly, the little brother to DC and New York, potentially win another World Series in this century. What has it been like living in New York amongst these people who won't want to see me be happy?
These animals, yeah. Look, I think worse would be if the Boston Red Sox were in the series.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
Either way, look, New York is such a good sports town. And actually, when I moved here, it was 7.5 years ago. And my dad said to me, pick a baseball team because you'll feel so much more at home if you choose one. I chose the Mets.
Oh,
We can
good.
all talk about how tragic
Good.
that went for me this year, too. It's just, look, if I'm a fan of your team, you're going to lose, is basically the rule. I chose the Mets. I'm an NL gal. So here I am as a Mets fan in New York City, which is kind of a minority as it is, right? It usually splits by Jersey and Long Island. So if you're Jersey or Manhattan, you're a Yankees fan. A lot of Long Islanders end up being maybe Yankees fans, Mets fans. But then there's this rule about like Mets, Jets, Giants, Yankees.
Yeah, right.
Some people violate that rule. I got so confused when I moved here. But here's what I would say about New York. Great sports town. There are so many people and so many professional sports to follow that honestly, baseball gets kind of a back seat to like football, hockey, all the other stuff that goes on. And I haven't followed hockey for most of my life. I just went to my second NHL game ever. So it's been fun to live in New York because people get super passionate about it, but it's still not Wisconsin. I like the scrappy underdog. I like the small market team. That's part of why I chose the Mets. And I like the team that can come back from behind.
It's amazing to me that Wisconsin doesn't have an NHL team. Hockey is so big in
I
Wisconsin.
just don't think
it's
there's
just
enough
amazing.
people.
That
Yeah.
might be true.
I don't think
That may
there's
be
enough
true.
people to support it, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's even a lot to have a Major League Baseball team, an NBA team, and the Packers. And the Packers aren't even in Milwaukee. So there's just, I think, maybe not enough people. Plus, Chicago's close enough.
Very
And you've
true.
got an NHL team there, and people really go for that.
Well, a huge win for the Phillies in Game 3 of the World Series last night. We'll take a look at the implications for the pricing on Sport Trade for Game 4 later tonight. Aaron Nola going for the Titans, and still the Astros, according to our market makers, are the better team, trading at 51.5 on the money line. The Phillies at $49. The Astros, again, on the run line at -1.5 at 38.5. The Phillies to cover 1.5, 62.5. So again, this is so close. The market makers thinking this could very well just be a one-run game. The over has been smashing in this World Series. 7.5 is the total, 48 to the over, and 7.5 to the under, and that's basically due to the pitching matchup coming up tonight. We'll also run through our new futures markets for you, Liz. Some of the World Series markets that we've got listed so far on Sport Trade. Let's see, is that going to pop up? Hopefully it pops up. Again, hey, this is what happens when you live stream. Let's try it one more time. See if we can get, there we go. Okay. So here's our World Series markets. Again, after a 2-run home run in the first inning yesterday, Bryce Harper has gone from $10 per contract to $24.50 per contract. Kyle Schwarber, also another Schwarbomb. Shout out to Wawa for jumping on the Kyle Schwarber home runs and creating marketing opportunities for themselves, up to $17 per contract. Then you've got a couple of Astros sort of lingering around here. But the biggest story to me in this World Series, Liz, and if feel free to chime in or tell me to move on, up to you. The Astros just not being able to get their bats going. None of their big bats have really done anything outside of Kyle Tucker's 2 home runs in Game 2. Other than that, the Phillies have surprised a lot of folks. If you haven't really watched them, I know I said to you they suck in September, but they're 30 games over 500 since changing their manager. And that, to me, is a sign, obviously, that they've been really good. And they play in a division with your Mets and the Braves that had 100 wins this year. So maybe 87 wins, just a little more than your Brewers, was maybe not an accurate portrayal of just how good this team is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you have to, that's the thing. I love the underdog, right?
Yeah.
And I watched the game last night. I admit I didn't watch the first 2 games, but I did read the recaps.
Okay.
So I watched the game last night, and here's what I'll say about this. And this is like maybe a 30,000 foot view. And when I watch sports, these are the things that I think about. I'm not like, probably like you are and many other guys that are watching sports. You can remember, what the weather was like in 1997 during the Super Bowl and that one pass that went from the 50-yard line to the 10-yard line. Like, I don't remember any of that stuff. But what I do watch when I watch a game, and I felt this last night, I tweeted about it actually last night, when there was a home run that was under review and then they called it a home run. I think it was run number 4, something like that. Anyway, you could feel it. I mean, I know the Phillies were at home, but you could just feel the energy. And after I think the first or second run, I was like, they're not going to be stopped in this game. You're just not going to stop the momentum. You're not going to stop this energy. They're on fire. And you could just feel it. And I think you can feel that in a lot of different sports. I would root for the Phillies for the rest of this. I know the Astros probably are supposed to be the better team, but I'm rooting for the Phillies.
Well, it's a real Sophie's choice, right? You've got Philadelphia and having to deal with them, and then you've got the biggest cheaters since the White Sox in 1900. So I don't blame anybody for sort of sitting this one out, but you tweeted that Philadelphia fans are living their best life right now, and I can absolutely confirm between this and the Eagles being 7-0, we are on an absolute heater, and I feel bad for the rest of the country. Something else I wanted to bring up. We'll transition off of baseball now. Something else that you tweeted, Liz, very recently that we'll bring up here in relation to your Green Bay Packers. We use probability here at Sport Trade. So pretty close to what the actual market was on Sport Trade once this game kicked off. It was, I believe, Buffalo 82 and Packers 18.5 at the time. Sentiment could be a little better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how that one played out a little bit.
Well, okay. We got on the board, though.
In terms of scoring points?
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to get on the board. There was a point when it was 14-0, and I was like, this could get really embarrassing really fast. So, look, I tweeted that. First of all, I tweet about the Packers pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
And this year has clearly been painful. I also talk a lot of trash, and I brag when we do good things. So now I have to eat crow and admit that it's not going well. That was also a play on, I'm an investor, and we talk about investment sentiment and market sentiment all the time. So that was a play on kind of the market sentiment, and sentiment could be better. Nobody expected the Packers to win that game. I didn't expect the Packers to win that game. It would have been a wonderful shock if they did. And honestly, scoring 17 points was a pretty big shock. Or was it 14? It was 14 or 17.
17.
Was a pretty big shock.
17 points, and it was the northwesterly wind at 35 miles per hour, because these are the things that we remember. Before I do want to ask you about a big week for the Federal Reserve too, but since you did bring up the sentiment on Aaron Rodgers, to give us the temperature of Go Pack Go Nation here.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably split. There are some diehard fans that will always love Aaron. And look, I like Aaron as a quarterback. I think that he has been a wonderful player for us. I think that there's a lot of drama that's gone into it. And last year, and look, I am not a team manager. I am not somebody who trades players. I would never be able to make these decisions in a true sense. But as a fan, I looked at last year and thought, I'd kind of rather keep Devontae. I mean, Rodgers was clearly getting to the end of his career. Who knows how much longer he'll play, but there was already speculation for a couple of years that would be his last. And look, we all see what's happening to Tom Brady this year. I don't want another one of those. We still have a bruise from what happened with Brett Favre when he left and went to a rival team. I mean, it was like he left and he came back with rival. It was really painful at that point. None of us want to go through that again. So it was almost like, can we learn our lesson and just kind of quit while we're ahead and give Jordan Love a few more reps next year? If it's not going to be a big year as it is, get him going. But anyway, that would be my opinion. It could be a long season for us and for Aaron.
The NFL trade deadline was Tuesday, Liz, and the best tweet I saw was, it would be a great idea for the Packers. Call the Raiders and see if they want to trade Devontae Adams.
Oh,
that would have been good, right?
Would be. Hey, I'd take him back.
I feel compelled to ask you. You don't have to answer, but maybe I'll answer. What would my price on Sport Trade would be to take a trip to South America and do ayahuasca with Aaron Rodgers? I'm going to price my interest at 0. Big Federal Reserve meeting. Big Fed meeting this week, as we mentioned earlier. Traders are preparing for a likely rate hike, and what you do so well at SoFi.com, Liz, is you write in a way that makes the very complicated easy to understand for the moronic, and I include myself in that group. So what I would like for you to do is sort of explain what's happening this week, but do it in a way where my big stupid sports brain can understand it.
Okay. So the Federal Reserve meeting is today. It's at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So that's when they're going to come out and they're going to say we hiked rates by blah blah blah
Hmm.
amount. And then at 2:30 there's this big press conference where Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, will make comments about why they decided to do that, and then he'll make some forward-looking statements about what they see coming down the road. Right now, the market expects 75 basis points, and a basis point is 1/100th of 1%. So 75 basis points is 0.75%. So the market expects the Fed to raise rates by another 0.75% today. That's pretty much baked in. That's kind of on lock. If they did anything different than that, it would be a surprise. And the Fed does not like to surprise people. So kind of a lock that we're going to get a 75 basis point hike. And then they're going to talk about maybe how quickly they're going to continue to raise rates. Maybe they're going to stop raising rates. All this discussion about a pivot, which is something else that we can talk about versus basketball. I grew up with a dad who was a basketball coach for 36 years. So I have done a lot of pivoting and a lot of camps in my time. And we can discuss the definition of a pivot. In my opinion, it's a change in direction, but everybody else seems to disagree when we're talking about the Fed. However, here's what I would say about just broadly the environment. So if we want to compare it to sports, we could say right after the pandemic, so, in March of 2020, the crap hit the fan, and the Fed and the government had to basically rescue the economy and the markets. So they pumped a lot of money in. There was all this stimulus. The Fed cut rates to zero in a very quick fashion. And what that did was it pumped a bunch of liquidity into the system. It made borrowing money very, very cheap. It created this huge tailwind. So if you think about, let's say it's football, right? It would be like the offense having 11 guys on the field and there only being 5 defenders. So we were just sort of full steam ahead. Everything was great. The wind was at everybody's back. And also the offense would be maybe 50 pounds heavier and 6 inches taller than all the defenders. Okay. So stocks went on a tear. They went on an absolute rip. The economy started to come back. Now we are in this period where inflation is high. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody. Inflation is high. It's something that we need to control, because if inflation stays this high, it puts us into a recession anyway. I've gotten asked that question many times. What's worse, a recession or inflation? And the answer is inflation, because if we don't cure it, we're in a recession no matter what. So inflation is high. In order to contain it, the Fed has done basically what I would consider leveled the playing field. So taken some of the liquidity out of the system. Raising rates is what takes liquidity out of the system. So they've changed the entire environment of the game. And they've put, now we have 11 defenders on the field and 11 offense on the field. Everybody has to be the same height. Everybody has to be the same weight. Nobody has an advantage. Okay. This is something I learned from my dad. Here's what I would say about, if you think about those players as stocks, you always have to focus on your fundamentals. But when the wind was at people's backs, they didn't really have to worry about their fundamentals, right? They could run a little slower. They could fall down a couple times. It was no big deal. They still were probably going to score because it was so easy. And it gave investors an opportunity to ignore maybe a stock or a player who wasn't as good or who didn't have the greatest stats. And those stocks still continue to go up no matter what. Now what's happening is that they don't have that tailwind anymore. So focusing on your fundamentals, I don't know, things like speed, footwork, agility, right? Everything that you do in a game, that's what is going to help you win. So it's the quality stocks. It's the stocks with fundamentals. And in my world, fundamentals for a stock are things like how strong is their cash flow? How good is their competitive advantage? What are they trading at? So what's their valuation? How much am I willing to pay for that? So that's kind of where we are now. And we've seen this huge, basically re-rating. So you would call it a leveling of the playing field. I call it a re-rating in valuations, meaning that all the stocks that were able to go up for seemingly forever for no reason now have come back down to earth. And we're sort of trying to find our footing in that environment. And the tough part is that environment isn't ending anytime soon.
You sent me a great example the other day when you said basically it would be like if they disallowed throwing the ball more than 10 yards down the field and you had to run.
Yeah.
So it would be like you're taking the Buffalo Bills who are here and the Chicago Bears who are here, and you're trying to sort of get them somewhere around here, right?
Yep. Yeah, you take away the big advantage. So the advantage in the low interest rate and high liquidity environment was for growth stocks. Okay. So maybe that would be the Buffalo Bills. They've got really nobody can stop them,
Hmm.
right? The advantage now, if everybody has to do a run play and everybody is the same size and it's raining everywhere, no, but there's no real advantage for any team. Maybe there's not even a home a home field advantage. Now you've got every single stock having to work harder to prove its worth and to maintain and protect its margins. And what I mean by that is the amount that's left over after costs are taken out. So you sell widgets, it costs you a certain amount to make those widgets and then get those widgets out to customers. All of the costs for businesses have risen because of inflation, but so have the prices that they can sell those widgets for. So their revenue has risen as well, which has made margins grow over this period to record high amounts. That's great because it creates a bigger buffer for companies. But now, in an environment where inflation is falling, so those prices might come down and wage costs are still really high, margins are still under pressure. Margins are now under more pressure than they have been for the last 12 to 18 months. So companies are having to protect. And if you think about that, so maybe the quarterback is your margins, right? You need a bigger O line to protect that quarterback just to make sure that he's not going to get sacked every single time or that he's not going to get completely taken out of the game and sold by every investor that's watching.
Along the same lines, again, our guest Liz Young, an investment strategy, the lead strategist for SoFi. We just launched futures on Sport Trade, so you could consider them sort of like a different asset class, right? If you were looking at this compared to maybe some other trades you would make on a per game basis. So we talked about the Packers. I'll tell you they're $1.40 per contract to win the Super Bowl. I'm sensing I'm sensing maybe that's not the direction you'd like to go, Liz. But the top three are actually controlling almost 55% of the market in the Bills, Eagles, and Chiefs. The Bills at $27, the Eagles at $14.5, and the Chiefs at $12.5. So I'm curious how you would approach this market in particular with perhaps a team like San Francisco at just $7. A team that maybe projects to have a successful run, but you're getting them from a lower initial number. And if you'd like, I can kind of scroll through if you have a team in mind.
No, I can do it with some of these examples.
Sure.
This is actually really easy to explain in a market perspective. So people may hear about growth stocks and value stocks. So here's what I would say about growth stocks. They're generally more expensive, right? Because they're supposed to have higher growth prospects in the future. So you have to pay more for them today. That's generally the rule. And then value stocks are generally cheaper. So they trade at a lower valuation. So I would look at San Francisco, and there's also a spectrum of value stocks. So you've got relative value, which is just compared to some other metric. You've got traditional value, and then you've got deep value. So the Packers right now would be what I would call deep value.
Very deep. Like
The
like
cheapest
2024
of
value,
cheap.
maybe. Yeah.
And then you also get into this area of it's deep value, and then you have to decide, is it what we call a falling knife? So it's cheap, but it's cheap for a reason, and you could buy it here, but it might only get cheaper, right? It can get cheaper until it goes to zero. So some of these might be falling knives. I can't bear to call my own team a falling knife, so I'm not going to do that, but we'll call the Packers deep value.
I'm going to clip that, and we're going to come back to it. Yeah.
I would call the 49ers something more like relative value, because relative to the Bills, they're cheap, right? But relative to the Packers, they're a little pricey. So what I would think about doing, I would almost compare the Bills to something like Apple stock, okay? Apple is in every single index. If you own any ETF that's broad-based, you probably own Apple. You own it if you own the Dow, you own it if you own the S&P, you own it if you own the NASDAQ. It's everywhere. It's in the Qs, it's everywhere, right? It's almost a risk as an investor not to have exposure to Apple because it drives so much of the price action in the indexes every day. So not to mention, we're all obsessed with it. controls our daily lives, right?
Right.
I have
Right.
3 Apple devices sitting somewhere nearby me right now. So we're sucked in. So I would compare the Bills to Apple, where if you're going to make bets on the Super Bowl, you probably have to have some kind of bet on the Bills, right? Then on the periphery is where you make other bets. So if I've got, let's call it just an S&P 500 ETF at the core of my portfolio, where Apple is 7% of that index, that's the Bills. And then maybe around the outside of the S&P 500, I'm making other more active bets. So maybe I'm betting on small cap stocks. Maybe I'm betting on financial stocks to do well. That's where you do things like, bet on the Niners. If you want to bet on something like the housing market, which is really starting to soften right now, and you've got home builder stocks that are down quite a bit, that would be something maybe like the Packers, right? So thinking about just kind of your main, as a sports bettor or as somebody who just wants to be in the game, thinking about the ones that have really good odds as your core, and then the ones that are juicier as your periphery. Now, look, it's all the same though. Like the juicy ones are where you're going to make more money if you end up being right.
Right.
So if you bet on the Niners and they go to the Super Bowl, like you just made hay. If you bet on the Bills and they don't, you lost a decent amount of money. So it's similar in the sense of high risk, high reward potential, but also, the difference with sports, and I was thinking about this last night, the difference with sports is that a long-term investment horizon for sports betting is like the full season.
Right.
Right. A long-term investment horizon for a stock investor is 5 to 10 years. So you can sit around and watch a stock go through a lot of different phases before you decide whether or not you want to cut your losses or you're glad you stayed in it. So sports is just a lot, probably more stimulating, which is why people love it, right? Because it happens so much quicker and the time frames are so much shorter.
That's so interesting. So to draw a comparison, would you consider like every NFL Sunday like an earnings call?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, Sunday, well, obviously on Monday, right?
Well, sure. Thursday, Sunday,
Thursday,
Monday,
Sunday,
whatever,
and
yeah.
Monday.
Yeah, right. A lot of calls.
Yeah.
A lot of
So
conference calls.
every weekend is earnings season.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it.
Oh,
Yeah.
print
And then
the
you
shirts. Print the shirts, Liz. Every
Yeah.
Sunday is earnings season. I love that. Okay. There you go.
Yep.
Well, we've got one more thing before we let you go, and we're so thankful for your time. But you are the expert here, right? So we have probabilities in sport trade. So we mocked up some of these charts for you to take a look at, and we want to compare them to stocks or other assets in the marketplace right now. So we're looking at the aforementioned San Francisco 49ers against the Rams from this past weekend. When you take a look at this probability chart, what does it remind you of?
Well, I don't know if you have my charts that I sent here.
We do.
Okay, so
if you want to set it up, then we can reveal it.
Yeah, so this chart reminds me of it's actually a currency who many of you are very familiar with. And this currency has grown quite a bit. It's shown considerable strength this year. You would think that it would behoove us for it to show considerable strength, but it actually caused a lot of problems elsewhere, and it's caused problems for the economy. But the chart looks almost exactly like this Niners Rams chart. And that currency is the US dollar. So I hope you can you see the edge of it where I can't see it on my screen.
Oh,
but
yes, we can
kind
see
of
it
grows.
all the way
Okay,
through.
good.
Yeah.
Great. So that's basically what happened this year. So the dollar, here's what I would say. Also, this is kind of painful for me because I work at SoFi, so the Los Angeles Rams are at SoFi Stadium, and this game was a home game. And from what I'm told, there were more Niners fans than Rams fans.
Well,
so
I'm sorry
if there are Rams fans,
I'm sorry to break this to you,
listening to
Liz.
this.
That happens at most Rams games.
I know, but I just want to say, for the record, PSA, if there are Rams fans watching this and listening to this, get to the stadium. Show up for your team.
Let's go.
Packers
$5 billion
fans travel.
stadium. Come on.
And it's a beautiful stadium. I've been there many times. And actually last year I was at the Niners Rams championship game.
You had one of your best podcasts, if I remember correctly, near SoFi.
That was at the Super
sports
Bowl.
only.
That was at the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a Super Bowl. So anyway, the dollar has done basically over this year what happened with the Niners at the end of that game.
Okay. Our
This
next, go
in the
ahead.
market is causing all kinds of problems, but basically what's happened is that the dollar is the best currency on a bad planet, I would put it.
Our next one here, Panthers and Falcons, a game that was insane, but ended up with the Falcons winning it in overtime after the Panthers missed not only an extra point to win it, but a 30-yard field goal to win it as well.
Yeah, this one, I'm not going to call it a currency because I'll get in trouble for it. I'm sure now everybody knows what I'm going to say. This is what would be some sort of digital, people have called it a store of value. People have called it a currency. People have called it an asset class. I'll just call it an asset class. You can bring it up now. This is something we talk about all the time. Bitcoin. Okay, so the Panthers-Falcons game, super volatile betting. Bitcoin couldn't be more volatile. Look at all these tops and bottoms and all the different gyrations that happen in between. And look, over the course of this chart, it ended lower than it began. So this is a classic boom bust cycle. And I think the game was probably similar to that. A lot of assets have to go through a boom bust cycle, or what would be called a price discovery phase, before they level out. Bitcoin is just not done with its boom bust and price discovery phase yet.
This one close to the heart for you. Apologies. But Packers and Bills from Sunday night.
Yeah. I mean, I actually was kind of surprised when you showed me this one. I was surprised. I was like, well, look at people were actually rooting for us a little bit. But then it fell apart. So this I would compare to, if there's any cyclers out there, this was a stock that got a lot of attention and got a lot of sales when everybody was stuck at home because we couldn't work out. We couldn't go to our gyms. We couldn't go to workout classes. And I think what they wanted was for everybody to have a bike in their house. So you can bring that one up now. It didn't quite work out the way they wanted to for Peloton. And there was this huge run up, obviously, right after the pandemic. Everybody had a bike, and then they came out with this treadmill. And then, you know what? We all went back outside. And now people are stuck with these $1,000 bikes that they just aren't using anymore. They're great clothes racks. And the stock has reflected Peloton's unfortunate sort of fall from grace that they saw when stay at home was no longer.
That feels like the perfect epitaph for Peloton. We all went back outside.
Yeah. It's kind of, yeah. Well, then there was that commercial that was weird too. Or was it a commercial or was it in the show? It was in a show, right?
Yes, it was the Sex and the City show, right? The guy dies like in the first 45 seconds on a Peloton.
Yeah, and they like didn't know about it. I don't know the whole story, but anyway, yeah. So that was that.
And that is all for Peloton. Our last one here. Giants and Seahawks. That one was so good. That one was completely spot on. This next one, our last one, Liz, New York Giants and Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. Okay. So this is another name that everybody will recognize. This is a single stock. What I wanted to do was show a chart that had a really distinct drop off, like in this Giants Seahawks game where there was one event, right? There was one moment that changed everything. And in this case, there are a couple moments that changed everything. You can bring it up now, and I'll talk about what those moments were. I didn't watch the Giants Seahawks game, so I don't know what that moment was that caused the big drop off towards the end. But this chart is Facebook, or I guess currently known as Meta. That first big drop, which is the one that I was kind of comparing here, was when they came out and said that they were going to invest all this money into the metaverse. Now, look, right or wrong, it changed basically the course of what people expected for the business and where their money would be invested. And also, this is in an environment where we knew rates were going to rise, and Meta falls into that category of growth stocks and, tech stocks. So already kind of under pressure from the environment, and then choosing to invest a ton of money in something that was quite untested and uncertain. And then the drop that you see later in the chart was just recently when they reported earnings and basically reiterated their commitment to spending on the metaverse. So investors didn't like it, and that's where it went.
That was incredible. Liz, this has been such a fun visit. I hope you had fun. We'd love to have you back whenever you have some free time on Market Movers. Hopefully, the Bucks will be in the mix here pretty soon, so we can get some good Wisconsin news.
Yeah.
Please enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your 6-pack of
Oh, yeah.
Wisconsin.
I do it one at a
finest.
time. I mean, I can't go through them all at once. I do it very slowly. I got to savor it.
Completely agree. I'm very jealous you're a spotted cow. Thank you so much, of course, Liz Young joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Quick update for everybody. No show tomorrow. I will be at World Series Game 5. Go Phils. Hopefully they can wrap it up. I'll party through the night. And then we are back on Friday talking about the biggest college football game of the entire season with Pine Sports. Of course, I'm referring to the big SEC battle between Georgia and Tennessee. We'll wrap it up. Check us back out on Friday. And then after that, every Monday through Friday at 4 o'clock right here on Sports Trade's various social channels. Have a good one.